Welcome to Excellence Through Execution, where ambition meets expertise. Hosted by Jason Weseman, this podcast dives into the world of business, exploring the stories of success and the lessons of failure through engaging discussions. Each episode, Jason brings insights from the forefront of business strategy and leadership. Get ready to discover the keys to business excellence.
Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of the Excellence Through Execution podcast. As always, I am your host, Jason Weseman, and today I am thrilled to be joined by Jill Miller, founder and CEO of Lunum, a company based in Chicago. Jill, thank you so much for joining us today.
Jason, I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, I looked at your background, very, very cool. Can't wait to hear about it. Why don't you kick us off with a little bit of a brief background as to who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my background is in business development in large CPGs at the enterprise level, mostly factory floor automation originally. And in 21, I took a pivot into the world of data to try and actually prove how we move people from the cost side of the balance sheet to the asset side of the balance sheet.
Okay, well, you're gonna have to elaborate on that a little bit because I know I don't necessarily speak that language. So what does that entail?
So what I saw over and over in my career was, and particularly in 2020 and 21, we heard a lot of like, employees are our most valuable assets.
Yep.
We invest in our people. And really, when you peel that back, and in the finance function, people are just a cost, right? They're no more valuable to an organization on the balance sheet than an office chair or a Post-it note.
Oh, you are going against 80 million different books that say otherwise.
Right. But until you can actually marry the finance function, like the request for money in the finance function, and this goes into sustainability efforts around social impact, efforts around DEI, right? You've got all these people out there asking, like, is investing in our people or investing in recruiting differently for more diversity or more innovation or opportunity pipelining, are these things creating a return on investment? And what I was seeing was a lot of investors are asking the question of, like, you've put $1 million into trying to deliver different results in innovation by making your workforce more diverse. Is there a return on that?
Yeah.
The way accounting works today, it's not fit for purpose to answer that question. So I actually left my job in June of 21 and didn't really have a plan other than I knew I wanted to try and fix a problem. And I asked the universe to help me fix it. And what was born out of it was Lunum. And the name Lunum, we define it as the light that anchors all of us on common ground. And that is the accounting for people differently, and building an accounting system that captures all of the aspects of investment in people and monetizes that so you can actually determine if you got a return on investment, right? I use an example of one of your local companies up in Milwaukee was under fire recently from an activist investor who said, they've got woke policies and they're investing in DEI and all these things. And of course, now it's Molson Coors. But within 24 hours, Molson Coors pulled back, put out a statement and said, we're going to get rid of supplier diversity. We're going to get rid of investing in employee resource groups. We're going to get rid of anything DEI related. And I'll just point out that as a female who spent 20 plus years in an industry where I was like 1% of the population, and someone who stood on the filling lines in Milwaukee and was pregnant, getting hit with high pressure hoses, I have an issue with that. And I have an issue with canceling it just because someone was screaming that it was a problem.
Called out, yeah.
But the problem that really exists is Molson Coors couldn't answer the question in a financial way. If they could have said, yeah, we've been using this company Lunum for a couple of years. We started tracking where we're investing in people, where we're investing in pipelining, we're investing in training development. And out of that $1 million investment, we've increased women in the workforce by 20%. We've decreased absenteeism by 50%. We've decreased attrition. We've increased innovation. We've captured more female beer drinkers. If that was the way they were looking at it and said, yeah, and it dropped $72 million to the bottom line over 3 years, that is the way we need to respond, right? When a financial question is asked, you have to respond in a financial way. And until now, that really hasn't been possible. So
it's all
Lunum makes
pie
it
in the
possible.
sky. And
Yeah, so we make it possible to answer those questions. And again, we were really lucky. I was like, how do you actually answer these questions? And we very early on, before we were even a company, we ran into a group at Harvard that was building an impact accounting framework for institutional investors and to drive regulatory changes. And I called them up and was like, can we use this for what I want to do? And they became great partners. That work has since moved on to a standards board that's like globally loaded with, it's called the IFEI, and they're looking at bringing this as a standard. So there's much like gap accounting, right? Gap accounting didn't exist until the stock market crashed in 29. And then what did they do? They built a system that is accurate, consistent, and comparable. And this is what's missing in all these conversations around environmental sustainability, people, that everyone's kind of reporting the way they want to.
whatever they want, yeah.
A
There's no
lot of it
scalpels.
is we're reporting what's good about us, not where we can do better. And understanding where we can do better, coming from a manufacturing background, is like, right, that's where there's money. If you're a CEO and you're not trying to figure out where you can do better in these areas and quantify it, you're just leaving money on the table.
Yeah.
So so that's kind of the story. And a lot of it has been really amazing to watch unfold in how companies are using the data and implementing it and being able to really solve problems that seemed insurmountable before.
Yeah. I mean, just sitting here as a third party, I would be amazed to figure out how you measure that. How do you measure the diversity efforts? How do you measure those things? And because you wouldn't, as a CEO, you wouldn't make an investment in anything else that didn't have a determined ROI, but we do with people.
Right. We do with people, and we look at it, but we actually look at it as a cost. So there's so much to peel back. I mean, it's, and I always say if people can respond in the way that we can provide the data, and they respond back to the questions around ESG for just a blanket term,
Sure.
and that's not acceptable, then like those people aren't actually investors, they are something else, right? So
Yeah, they have a different motive.
yeah, I mean, I think we have to answer the questions. I mean, all day long, do I believe truly that women bring something unique to a lot of organizations? 100%. Do I believe it's worth investing in us? 100%. But technically, you can't invest in a cost either.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah.
yeah, my dream is like to change corporate accounting.
You know what? Never dream small.
No, and eradicate like economic immobility and save the planet all at the same time.
It's good. It's a good goal for a Tuesday.
Yeah. So that's kind of the background of Lunum and how we got here.
Well, that's pretty amazing. Well, as everybody takes a look at her profile on LinkedIn, you see she's had a lot of jobs. She's done a lot of businesses. Let's take you back to when you're starting your first business, your first couple of businesses. What inspired you to start your own business? What was that spark that said, you know what, it's time for me to do my own thing?
Yeah, so that would have been in 21. So prior to that, I was mostly in business development. And in 21, it was really, we had there was a lot going on in the world. We had a lot going on in our family. And I just got to a point, and it wasn't planned. I got to a point one day where I was like, I cannot turn around and wonder if I could have done something differently. And if my kids are going to be screwed up and not the amazing kids I wanted them to be, because I didn't pause and change my trajectory and like really stand up for what I believe in and bringing solutions. I won't say it was planned. It was like, my soul is broken. I cannot do this all one more day. And didn't know what I was going to do, and spent like 6 months literally just having lunches and coffees and asking all these leaders, like, you put all this skin in the game and you put, $200 billion on the table for environmental and for this and for people. And like, how are you going to deploy that money and drive the change that you're saying you could drive? And by and large, the answer I got back was we have a plan to have a plan. And I was splitting days for about 4 or 5 months between those kinds of conversations and volunteering on the west side of Chicago, which is one of the more gun violent neighborhoods in Chicago. And I was struggling to reconcile how, where I sit in the loop in Chicago, that kids 3 miles west of here were dying in the streets.
Yeah.
They themselves or their parents were working for companies that supported brands that we know and love and trust, right? They were part of the supply chain. And I couldn't reconcile how the Dow and the market was closing at record highs while we had kids dying in the streets. And we just weren't really attacking the problem, right? And I started down a path for many months and it was great. I mean, we ate at the food pantry for a while, and did side hustles, but I was like, no, I'm going to figure out where I belong in the universe. And I did a ton of research on like trying to overcome some of the problems we haven't been able to overcome, and really stuck in the vertical I knew, which was manufacturing, and looking at like, how do we try to do so much in the supply chain, but things aren't changing, right? Like I identified really this like middle market supply chain is where there's the biggest opportunity to like create improvement from both a business perspective and a financial outcome, along with like intersecting that idea of purpose and profit.
Well, very cool. So let's take it to the point that you wanted to change the world in many ways. As the boss, what are some misconceptions about running a business when you want to do that, and that's your goal, but the reality hits on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think one of the most common misconceptions, people all look at, like friends of mine look at me and they all think like I'm making bank, and I'm like, okay, you haven't seen our bank account, but we're a pretty lean company. I think that is like the minute you start running a business, people think you're off and running and that everything is in line, particularly like where we're at. I mean, we're a Delaware C Corp, so we're like a considered tech startup, which leads to like, I put myself under the same scrutiny as the leader, as a public company leader would. So it's not my company, it's the company. Yep. I think that's one misconception. And I also think in general, I think people don't always see how hard some days very envious of people who have like a solid W-2, and as you build it, right? I mean, the definition of startup is a business model that has not been proven in an extremely uncertain environment. Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't see that. Yeah, I looking back, I don't know if I would ever do this again.
Here we are, so too late now.
I've already got like my next 3 companies in like planning stage, but it is so much fun. But there's a lot of sacrifice. I think people don't realize getting a business started. I sometimes post on LinkedIn when we have like an anniversary that, like this year, like we turned 2. We're a ton. Mm-hmm. We're still trying to figure out how to walk. And
terrible too.
It's very much like,
hopefully they're not terrible.
No. I liked my kids when they were 2. I like my company too. But yeah, I think it's it's a lot harder than people think, getting something up and off the ground.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, how do you with the family and everything else, how do you maintain that balance? I mean, how do you keep yourself motivated and focused?
So first, I love what I do. Like I think it's hardwired in me and where I've belonged for a long time. I don't know that I've worked out the work-life balance yet, but I do try to, I've got little like habits. One of them is I listen to the same 5 songs every morning when I wake up.
Oh, nice.
Just put good things in my head and just things that level set me. It's kind of meditation, and I try to stay healthy. I think that's like a huge part of Founderland is trying to stay healthy. And that, I always say I give myself like, if I can get a B- in life, I'm good, but that gives me the energy I need. And I don't do as good a job of taking time off, but I try to take time off. And when I do, I'm learning that like going to London is not the right place to go. I should just lock myself in an ashram for a few days, which I've done twice this year.
Okay.
And doing more meditation. But yeah, it's my children and my and Lunum are on a very similar plane
Yeah,
when it comes to work-life balance. And yeah, I mean, it's tough. Other than that, everything else is second or third or lower.
sure, sure. Well, we've kind of talked about the past and how you got here. You've talked about your next three companies. Can you offer us a glimpse into some of your future plans and goals for you and your business?
Yeah. So at Lunum, so this year we launched what's called Bright Star Verification. It's kind of like, I think of it like Weight Watchers for corporations and their accounting, or like what LEED is for a building. We are people inside those buildings, which is growing the community of people that are understanding that we have to approach some of these long-standing environmental and social problems in like a very continuous improvement way, and building a community around that. And then ideally, like my goal is that I wasn't joking when I say that we reinvent accounting. And my goal is to eventually become something that is so necessary inside a company that nobody would send out an annual report without an integrated impact and financial statement. We've talked about things like bringing in, we do moonshot stuff all the time. It's kind of like what we're doing anyway. But yeah, I mean, we've looked at things like, I just had a conversation with a satellite company of like, can we start tracking human rights and environmental and sending out violations through satellite data that's aggregated? Like, just crazy stuff. You never know where it's going to take you. And I think this is where you have to constantly like be listening to what's happening around you in your market and be willing to like adjust as you move along. I don't know that we have a vision of where we think the impact accounting market will go. And I think we're pretty far ahead of most in that thinking, but I do think we're gonna see it evolve. I mean, I always say to my team, like, YouTube started as a dating app.
Yeah.
Right. And think of it now. So yeah, that's Lunum. And then I've got a few things after that I just need to compartmentalize until I get there.
Well, that's awesome. This has been awesome. I really appreciate your time. Check them out at lunum.io, LUNUM.io. Let's get you out of here on this, Jill. Again, it's been great. Take yourself back, low these few years. What advice would you offer to aspiring entrepreneurs who are just starting out their journey?
I think there's a few things. I think one is when you truly believe the steps you're taking forward are the right steps, don't let anybody push you off that. And I now understand why entrepreneurs become these crazy like people about like putting their foot down, because you can get very distracted very quickly. I think that leads to my next, which is like find your swim lane inside the swim lane.
Yeah.
And make your customer make it your goal not to generate revenue, but make it your goal to make your customers as successful as they can be and as referenceable as they can be. And I think the last is there's a wonderful book. I've spent some time with Sir Ron Cohen, who's like the father of impact investing and he was knighted for bringing venture capital to the UK. And he wrote a book called The Second Bounce of the Ball, which is by and large to me, the most valuable startup strategy book I've read. And I've had a chance to spend some time with him recently. And I think, he talks about very clearly like perseverance, the days that you want to quit and give up and everybody else around you is rooting against you. Like, if you really believe what you're doing is the right thing, like keep going. And, I think all in all, building companies, we look around us, like everything was manifested from an idea that came to fruition. So I'm a firm believer, like it's persevering. And I have to tell myself that a lot of days. I tell my staff, like, there are days I go home and cry myself to sleep too, because it's really hard.
Well, let's keep those days to a minimum.
Yeah. Anymore, they're much more minimal.
All right, good. Well, Jill, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. It was really great meeting you and hearing about your journey.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Such a great conversation.
Yeah.
That wraps up this episode of Excellence Through Execution. Thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.